Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode, or addition to the RTC book club. That is a year-long book club thing, maybe next year long as well. I haven't decided yet. But book club, where we're reading a bunch of Greek myth retellings, and it's an open book club, so you can join at any time, leave at any time. You can stay in and join the discussions, all sorts of stuff like that. So I'm just going to give you guys a review for the book that we read last month, which was Medusa by Jessie Burton. If you've read that book already and want to join the conversation, send me a message on Instagram. My details are listed down below, and I'll add you to the group chat, and you can join the conversation and talk about this book. If you would like to join the next month's book club, the book we're going to be reading next month is Daughters of Olympus by Lynn. So if you want to pick that book up and join the conversation next month, come join the club. It's really fun. We have a great time. The conversations are really good, and I've enjoyed it. It's been really fun. But as always, like I said, it's an open book club, so you can join, you can stay, you can go, whatever you want. It's up to you, no pressure. But this is what we're doing next month. But right now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to do that. I know how technology works. I want to talk to you about Medusa by Jessie Burton. You guys, this book was good. Like, it was a good book. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It was, it's sort of in the genre of, like, YA fantasy Greek myth retelling. And that made it very easy to read. It was very straightforward. It was also not that long, so I was able to get through it in, a couple of days without having to, like, push myself to make it to the deadline or anything. So that was good. I really enjoyed the book. I will get to spoilers in a second, so if you can hang in. I'll let you know when the spoilers are coming up if you want to read this book after I tell you about it. But yeah, it was really well written. I listened to it on Audible. I really enjoyed the narrator. I thought that her voice alone added a lot to the story, but the story was fairly lyrical in its prose. I thought that a lot of the description by the author was really fantastical, really nice, and really good at setting the scene and sort of the ambiance of the moment. And essentially, this is a story about Medusa and Perseus and their first encounter together, and it departs from the original myth a little bit in the story. And the ending is a little bit different. That's all I'm going to say as far as spoilery things in the non-spoiler part. But I wasn't opposed to that. I kind of enjoy the liberty that they took to tell sort of a different story in the same wheelhouse from what I knew. I wasn't expecting that, so it was a pleasant surprise. And honestly, like, it was just a genuinely good book. In our arbitrary rating system, I would give it like 8 stamps out of infinity. Doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. The numbers don't matter. All that being said, I liked it. I really don't have that much to, like, pick at or anything like that. I enjoyed the characterization of Medusa and the way that she delivered her story. I would give slight trigger warning if you're familiar with the story that of Medusa, then you kind of know what the trigger is. If you're not, I don't want to break it to you, but maybe don't approach it if you're not prepared. But it's still off the page, and very barely mentioned, so it was easy to get through without any sort of super strong feelings in a way that, like, took away from the story, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed Medusa's characterization. I even enjoyed her conversations with Perseus. I don't think I have ever found a format in which I've been like, yeah, that Perseus guy is pretty cool, except for maybe, like, the Rick Riordan series, Percy Jackson. Like, at that point, I'm like, well, that Perseus is cool. The original OG Perseus is a chode. And so, like, that remains somewhat true. A little bit differently portrayed in this book, and I'll get to that in a little bit in the spoilers. But, like, he was fine for what it was. I enjoyed their conversation more than I enjoyed his characterization, but I appreciated his characterization. And I will say the representation of her sisters Euryale and Steno was delightful. They had actual personalities for as little screen time, book time, page time that they got. They were also enjoyable in their characterization. I felt that they were believable characters that were grounded in this universe, and I enjoyed that they had distinct personalities, but they also weren't like just casual standby, like, I don't know how to describe it. Like observation characters who were just watching everything go down. They weren't doing that. They had very active roles. So I really did appreciate that in the story. And that's all I'm going to have for the non-spoilery bits. So if you don't want to be spoiled, get out of here. Come back when you finish the book. We can talk about it in the comments. But right now, it's spoilers. So you've been warned. The book was good. Like, it wasn't like, knock my socks off good. I still, there are other books that I've read so far this year in this book club specifically that I've enjoyed more, but it was definitely sort of a little bit of the mental brain floss that I needed to sort of rededicate myself to finishing my goal of reading a Greek myth every month, a Greek myth retelling every month. But otherwise, like, yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it because it was a little bit easy breezy, which was good because of everything I had going on this month. I really don't want to get bogged down with something super heavy, especially until I understood how much labor I would be undertaking to achieve all the things I did this month. And I can't stand Perseus, but I did appreciate that they sort of made it clear that the reason he's there in the first place is due to unfortunate circumstances, sort of beyond his control, and he's so dedicated to his mom that he's like willing to do anything. But the turn when he finally figures out who Medusa is and what he has to do was so upsetting, more from her perspective than it was from him. Like, I didn't really I felt bad for him for being put in this situation, but the fact that he was so unwilling to sort of budge from like what he was on to, like the quest that he was on to, just made it very hard for me to be like, oh, well, he's likable, which I think, isn't the intention. The intention was, blah, 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 words are really hard. The intention was not to make us like him, but to be like, okay, like, I understand why we're here, why he's doing this. He's so dedicated to his mom that he feels like he has no other option but to do this, but also so shook by the revelation that the person he just confessed his love to is the monster he is in fact hunting. And I think there's sort of a argument to be made for feeling tainted by that knowledge and then reacting in such a way that caused the inevitable outcome. I wasn't expecting him to turn to stone. I thought, like, I was waiting the whole moment for the ball to drop, and then when it dropped, I was like, here we go, she's gonna die, but she doesn't. And honestly, I really liked that. I really liked that departure from the myth. I have been having a lot of conversations about it and a lot of feelings about it the more that I've been doing this Greek retelling sort of personal challenge through the year via this book club. The more that I have been considering what the value of Greek retellings are, and I watched a really interesting video about it, and the question that was posed is, what are they adding in their retelling to like enhance the story? Where's the actual bits of feminism coming into play? Because sometimes, like, some of these stories say that they're feminist retellings, but then the feminism is like in their brain, like the in the mind of the character, and everything else in the universe is still bogged down by the patriarchy, which is true to life, right? And also especially life at that time, but it doesn't really enhance the narrative of the story or evolve it in any way that sort of makes the retelling worth reading. And so I've been asking myself that as I'm reading through these books, like, what did this add to the story? Where was the actual feminism inserted? And, like, how did it shape the myth or work within the myth or transform the myth in a way that makes not only the story worth reading, but also worth retelling? Because you're telling somebody else's story, essentially, with these. Granted that most of these stories are oral traditions and they're passed down that way. So there's a lot of room for variation and stuff like that, and it depends on what translations and things like that. But, you're taking another story and you're adding your own spin on it. And what's the spin? Does it enhance the narrative? Does it detract from the narrative? Are you missing sight of the original goal? Like, are you doing something meaningful with the sort of IP, so to speak, that you've taken hold of? in your story, or are you just retreading the same steps without actually adding anything or anything transformative or like enhancing to the actual story? And so as I'm like processing this information and reading these books, when I got to this book, I was expecting to hit all the same story beats. And when we sort of deviated away from that, I was like, whoo, that was like a little breath of fresh air, because it did become a much stronger feminist retelling in that regard when they deviated from the original story to have the conclusion be that Perseus finally gets to look upon Medusa, and instead of him cutting off her head sneakily behind her back while she's asleep, he tries to do it straight to her face and ends up turning into stone himself. And she ends up being liberated by the act when she finally embraces who she is, accepts who she is. And that's sort of the whole crux of the narrative of the story, is that after the incident that happens with Poseidon, she goes to this island with her sisters, and she spends like 4 years just sort of lamenting her luck, lamenting her life, hating herself and her circumstance. And then, when Perseus arrives, she's so taken by how attractive he is and how nice he is to her that, she sort of gets caught up in this sort of romanticized fairy tale illusion of happiness. Like there's a possibility for her to be happy again, and she gets really hopeful by the idea, and it sort of sparks up a lot of feelings. And of course, like, she has to get reprocess what happened to her in a way where she's sharing her story with Perseus, and it triggers some memories for her, it triggers some incidences for her, but it's also helping her sort of move past it, because she's telling somebody else. Finally, she's getting to tell somebody else her story, somebody who isn't her sister, somebody who hasn't already retreaded the same story with her over and over again in the 4 years that she's been there. She's talking to a whole new person and finally getting to tell her story and being accepted for it, because that's the thing, is that Perseus and her get to commiserate in the unfortunate circumstances of their lives where things have been taken from them and they have a loss of control. And so she finally gets this little bit of hope. She gets to process some of her grief, and she gets to navigate her trauma in a way that wasn't substantive in the way that it was written, but I was able to infer that a lot of that was going on while she was talking to him. And then, she has a very meaningful conversation with her sister Steno towards the end, where Steno is basically telling her, it's great that you are finding yourself in a position where you could possibly fall in love, but if they don't accept you for you, then it's not going to work out and you need to get out of there. So just make sure before you commit to this man, this man really actually wants you and not the idea of you or the idea that you've portrayed or concocted to him. So when she does finally let the ball drop that she is Medusa, she finally gets to understand the message her sister was trying to deliver to her and see what her sister was actually saying. And it's a really great way to sort of deliver a not only processing your trauma through various methods like grieving, but also communication, but also being able to reclaim your own autonomy and your own sense of self, because in those situations there's a loss of control, a loss of identity, because your autonomy was sacrificed or lost or taken in these acts. And she was able to not only accept what happened to her and sort of push past that to move beyond it, but to turn it into instead of woe is me attitude, reclaiming my power and authority and becoming comfortable with the person I am after the tragedy. And that was just really great. It was fantastic. It was really simple, but really well done for the idea that was there. There were some cute moments, they had some dogs and that was cute. And like I said, Euryale and Steno were actual characters. Euryale had a very loud, boisterous, sort of ruthless a little bit personality. And Steno had that more serious, logical personality, but she wasn't soft-spoken or meek in the same way that the sisters were portrayed in Medusa's sisters. Both of those sisters had an immense amount of flaws, which made it very hard to like them as characters. This one, they have the same sort of flaws in their approach, but the way that these characters are written allows them sort of more agency and more action. They're more action oriented than they were in the previous book that I read in the same topic. And I really appreciated that. I appreciated that, like, they saw what happened and they called out the bullshit. They demanded justice. They stood up for their sister, and, you know, push come to shove, they embraced the changes that happened to them and accepted that that was their fate. And then they, you know, continued to take care of their sister, their mortal sister, because they're immortal, after the fact, willing to wait out while she processes everything, because for them, they have forever. So, like, letting Medusa take the time, letting them all stay on this island, and just sort of mellow out while this is going on wasn't a sacrifice for them in the way that it was a sacrifice of time for Medusa, because hers was limited. And they genuinely wanted her to live her life and embrace what had happened to her so that she could move on and, you know, actually enjoy the few years that she has. And but they didn't want to push her, you know, like, so they weren't trying to push her off the island. So they were giving her the time to grieve and process, but also trying to encourage her to, you know, take this new identity that she now has and take ownership of it. And it was just really nice. I really enjoyed it. I don't really have a ton to say about this. It was a very short book, so there's not a lot of points to cover. I think I've hit the majority of the prominent things. There's an interesting conversation to be had in the conversations that Medusa and Perseus had, where Perseus realizes that the problems his mom is having were the same problems that Medusa was having, because they were both victims of stronger men in power. And he sort of has, like, a moment where he has to, like, reckon that this is an issue not just for his mother, but for other women as well. And that was nice. That was a nice little, like, connection to make in the dialogue. And the style of writing really lent itself to that. It's all told from Medusa's perspective, but there's, like, moments where, you know, she will go down to, like, a special spot in her cave so that she can be out of sight, so she can talk to Perseus, and he respects her boundaries. He doesn't proceed to go closer to her even though he desperately wants to see her. He doesn't actually stop respecting her boundaries until he finds out that she's actually the monster he was sent out there to hunt, at which point his whole attitude shifts. And there's a lot to be said in that motion, or that moment too, with the way that young men have a lot of pressure put upon them, a lot of expectations, and are expected to abide by it, whether it comes at the cost of women or not. And that's kind of the situation that unfolds, is that he feels like he's obligated to follow through with everything for the sake of his mother, and refuses to see that there's another alternative. But also he's feeling hurt because Medusa did give him an alternate name when she first met him, but she never once implied that she wasn't a monster. She told him she was disfigured. She told him those sorts of things, but he was sort of blinded by youth and by love, so he didn't see that being a problem up until it was revealed that she was in fact the monster he was looking for. And then he was like, this is awful, and he continued to follow through with it, to his unfortunate demise. He did not win or succeed in this process because he wasn't able to evolve his thinking, or change his thought patterns, or even take a moment to, like, sit back and consider all of the consequences and what could be done, what things could be changed, how there was another solution there. And Medusa tried to stop him. She tried to warn him. She begged him not to come closer to her because she knew something bad would happen. In the book, she doesn't know what is going to happen when men see her. So up until this point, no man has ever seen her. So she doesn't know that her vision turns men to stone. She just knows that Athena told her that woe would befall men if they had seen her. So she doesn't know what's going to happen, but she knows something bad is going to happen, and she tries to prevent that as much as she can. And unfortunately she can't, because Perseus is so single-minded in completing this task, because he's just so convinced that Medusa is a monster, even though he just declared love to her. And I think part of that has to do with his embarrassment and trying to cover that up, and having, like, no way to express that little bit of toxic masculinity. And I don't know, like, there was a lot for me to pick up in this story, I think, because it was a YA novel, so it wasn't super complex, which allowed me to fill in a lot of gaps and find a lot of meaning, which I enjoyed. And like I said, I generally enjoyed the book. It was really easy to read and get through, and I didn't find anything to be super complicated, or, like, it's an easy afternoon read. It was like 3 hours, I think, on Audible. So you could probably read this book in a day. And I would recommend it. I absolutely would recommend it. I enjoyed the book. It even the deviation from the original narrative didn't bother me because the book was put together well enough that I felt like the deviation was earned and worth it and fit the overall moral of the story and the lesson that is being learned by the characters and stuff like that. So everything worked out really well, and I just genuinely enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to reading Daughters of Olympus next month. It's supposed to be about Demeter and Persephone, and that's my jam. So I am excited to read it. And that's gonna be it for me, guys. I know this is the shortest review I've ever done. I should probably take notes so that more of them can be this long in the future, but sometimes I have a lot to say. But that's gonna be it this time for me, you guys. I will catch you guys all in the next one. As always, I appreciate your faces, and until then, happy crafting, guys. Bye.